Let's get ready to rumble!
Yeah, you ready to get recorded now, yeah, for the interview?
Yes, man, come on, man, stop playing, man. I'm ready like I'm ready to fight.
Anything you want to tell the public out there?
I am the greatest!
You got knocked the fuck out, man. Get me knocked out. Damn.
Word is born, I'm a smoke 'em, yo, don't make no move. I treat it like boxing, stick and move, nigga. Left, right, and he was out for the night.
You know we need that trademark bark before you depart from our company, man. You know what I mean? Can we get the barking and we're going to need that bark, you know what I mean?
Oh, man, Jesus for life, fellas. Dog is coming.
I don't care if he knocked me down, I was ready to go with him. Whatever you wanted to do, I was going to match him. All the way, mate, all the way. Now you might start believing in the Dark Destroyer.
Boxing beats and rhymes.
I got knowledge, another sucker's lacking.
I don't know if you want to answer. Possible Manny Pacquiao fight with Floyd Mayweather. How you feel about that?
Well, basically, it's a fight that still has the potential to happen.
I'm Sonny Liston, I'm Jack Dempsey. There's no one like me. I'm from their cloth. There's no one that can match me.
Boxing beats and rhymes. Boxing beats and rhymes. Boxing beats and rhymes. Boxing beats and rhymes.
Born in Indiana, 1899, Ray Arcel had been raised in Spanish Harlem, educated at Stillman's Gym. During the roaring 20s, he enjoyed a highly successful partnership with Whitey Bimstein. Over the course of the Great Depression, he tutored the likes of Barney Russ, Jack Kidd Berg, Sixto Escobar, and handled the great Benny Leonard. Leonard had been forced to make a comeback after losing much of his money in the stock market crash. Arcel had worked the corner of James J. Braddock on the night the Cinderella Man turned back into a pumpkin against Joe Louis. He also worked as a Charles's corner when he lost to Rocky Marciano. In between, he had handled so many members of Louis's infamous Bum of the Month Club that Jimmy Cannon dubbed him the Undertaker. Arcel often found himself in conflict with the powers that be. In the early 1950s, he went into partnership with Sam Silverman, the Boston promoter who 2 decades later would launch Marvin Hagler's career, packaging a Saturday Night Fights series for ABC. The enterprise put him at odds with not only the mobbed-up International Boxing Club, but also the so-called Managers Guild, a New York-based organization, which also operated at the behest of boxing godfather James A. Norris. In 1953, Arcel was standing outside the Hotel Madison, adjacent to the old Boston Garden, in conversation with fellow manager Willie Ketchum. A man sneaked up behind Arcel, pulled a lead pipe out of a paper bag and smacked him over the head. Arcel spent 19 days in the hospital, much of which he was in a coma. On reviving, he decided to get out of boxing for good. For many years thereafter, Sam Silverman never left his office without first slipping a flunky a few bucks to go out and start his car. It had been said that it took Roberto Duran to bring Arcel back to boxing after an 18-year hiatus, but this is not entirely accurate. 20 years earlier, Arcel had handled a Panamanian pugilist named Federico Plummer for Carlos Eleta. In 1971, Eleta was grooming Alfonso Peppermint Fraser for a title fight against junior welterweight champion Nicolino Loche of Argentina, and pleaded with Arcel to come to Panama to train his prospect. Arcel, who brought along his trusted assistant Freddie Brown, agreed to put the finishing touches on Frazier. Eleta had also suggested that Arcel may be interested in working with his other youngster, Duran. But Arcel declined, preferring to concentrate on Frazier. But Arcel and Brown, after seeing Duran destroy Benny Huertas in his American debut, they liked what they saw. He also destroyed the Japanese veteran Hiroshi Kobayashi, although Duran would recall his opponent only as some Chinese guy. Kobayashi had in fact held the World Boxing Association junior lightweight title from 1968 until 71. He was dethroned by Alfredo Massano, less than 3 months before he fought Duran. Duran took him out in 7. Arcel became a believer. There was a conflict between Arcel and Brown and Plomo Quinones, who felt his authority was being undermined, but for the most part they coexisted without any major fuss. Brown handled the day-to-day conditioning. Arcel insisted, though, you do not tinker with Duran's style. Don't change a thing. Duran had 2 more fights, a decision over the wily Cuban veteran Angel Robinson Garcia. He also stopped Francisco Munoz in the first before he took on Ken Buchanan at Madison Square Garden, taking Buchanan's lightweight title. Duran returned to Panama, 2 more first-round knockouts before returning to New York for a non-title fight against Esteban de Jesus, who was 32-1, a Puerto Rican fighter trained by Gregorio Benitez, who was the father of Wilfredo. By all accounts, they say Duran was undertrained, unprepared, and this would be the first loss of his career and the only loss in 72 fights. Duran was floored from a left hook in the first round, and De Jesus washed him on the scorecards. Bill Recht and Harold Letterman had it 6-2-2, 6-3-1, while Arthur Mercante Sr., the referee, had it 5-4-1 for De Jesus. Duran blamed the loss on the lingering effects of a car crash in which he had been involved in a few weeks before the fight, but his handlers knew better. When they arrived at a Manhattan restaurant, a disconsolate Duran was in tears. You didn't lose the fight in the ring, you lost it in training, Aletta admonished him. A rematch 2 years later with De Jesus would see Duran on the floor again, but this time he got up and knocked out De Jesus with a right to the head in the 11th. Duran would rule the lightweight division for the next half a dozen years. Apart from the De Jesus fight, he won 33 times, 25 of them by knockout, and made a dozen defenses of his championship, and on several occasions embellished the reputation for savagery, like he displayed in the Ken Buchanan fight. In his first defense, Duran hit Jimmy Robertson with a right hand in the first and knocked 3 of his teeth out. He then knocked out Robertson for good in the 5th. Hector Thompson, an Australian Aborigine, who had killed a man in the ring. This didn't impress Duran. Duran knocked him out in 8. Ray Lampkin in 1975 at the Gimnasio Novo, Panama, was left convulsing on the canvas from a left hook, twitching. Although Lampkin was rushed to the hospital, Duran insisted that he had not even landed his best shot. He said, if I had landed my best shot, if I had been training, he wouldn't be in the hospital, he'd be in the morgue. 6 months later, Duran fought a fella named Pedro El Toro Mendoza in a non-title fight in Nicaragua. Mendoza was a local favorite held in such esteem by the Nicaraguans that the country's dictator, General Anastasio Somoza, had personally asked Duran to carry El Toro long enough to avoid embarrassing him. But Cholo couldn't help himself and knocked him out in 1. Bobby Goodman, then a Don King publicist, was in Managua for a WBA convention and had gone to watch Duran, along with another of King's fighters, Wilfredo Gomez, perform that night. And he recalled a wild melee broke out in the ring afterwards. Some woman, it was believed to be Mendoza's wife, jumped in the ring and headed straight at Duran. Goodman recounted to Al Goldstein in A Fistful of Sugar, he just whirled around and flattened the broad with a right hand, better than the one he starched Mendoza with. The thing about it, there was no contrived bravado about Duran. He was just a fucking beast. Duran by this stage was struggling to make 135. In the rubber match against Esteban de Jesus, Jesus had acquired the WBC version of the title. Duran won by a 12th round KO, but he didn't automatically relinquish the belts formally as yet. He had 5 fights at welterweight when he was matched with Carlos Palomino, a formidable welterweight who had held the title, taking it from John H. Stracey from the United Kingdom, and losing it to Wilfred Benitez. Duran washed Palomino on the scorecards over 10. in Madison Square Garden. And it looked like he was going to get a shot at Benitez, but there was another offer on the table from Sugar Ray Leonard, which would pay over $1 million for Benitez. That would have been easily his highest payday. In '79, all of Leonard's fights were on network TV. Leonard was more popular, or at least as visible, as the heavyweight champion Larry Holmes and the other heavyweight champion John Tate. His last fight before taking on Benitez was against Andy Price, who he knocked out in 1 round. The Andy Price fight was on the undercard to Larry Holmes, who was defending his heavyweight title against Ernie Shavers. Duran was also on the bill against Seferino Gonzalez. Andy Price was a spoiler, 27-5 with 3 draws, who had wins over Carlos Palomino and Pepino Cuevas in non-title fights. Earlier he was managed by the actor Burt Reynolds, but by the time he met Leonard, the singer Marvin Gaye had his contract. Duran didn't look too good against the aptly named Speedy Gonzalez, but he posted up a comfortable points win. In the main event, Holmes had to get off the canvas in the 7th and stopped Ernie Shavers in the 11th. Angelo Dundee, he wanted a longer fight rather than the quick blowout that Leonard registered against Price. Because Price had a similar style to Benitez, he had hoped to use the tune-up fight to give Leonard a little more experience in taking on the wily, though very young at the time, 2-time weight champion Benitez. Even one of Duran's handlers was impressed with Leonard's performance. He said, in another year, Ray could be ready to even face Duran. Hagler had also been active during this period, though not all of his campaigns were in the ring. Already angered by Hagler's exclusion from King's US Boxing Championships, a pair of powerful Massachusetts politicians had been enlisted in his cause, demanding that he be allowed to fight for the middleweight championship. After the Briscoe fight, Hagler fought a Texan veteran named Willie Warren at the Boston Garden and stopped him in 7. On the undercard, an up-and-coming Italian-born New York middleweight named Vito Antuofermo had fought Mike Hallisey in a bout that was memorable because Hallisey appeared to accomplish the unthinkable and outbled Antuofermo, who was a notorious bleeder. This prompted Don Dunphy's immortal ringside call that Antuofermo with the white trunks and the red blood, and Hallisey with the green trunks and the red blood. At the beginning of 1979, Hagler scored a first-round knockout over Sugar Ray Seales in their 3rd meeting, and knocked out Bob Patterson and Jamie Thomas in a pair of New England fights, but he seemed no closer to the brass ring than ever. Hagler by now aligned himself with Sam Silverman's one-time associate, Anthony Rip Valenti. Prior to Silverman's 1977 death, the godfatherly Valenti had primarily focused on amateur boxing.